Member from Brampton West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that, in the opinion of this House, the Legislative Assembly of Ontario supports the federal government's decision to offer a full apology in the House of Commons for the Komagata Maru incident of 1914 and calls upon future federal governments to never again enact immigration laws based on one's religion, ethnicity, gender, race, or any other discriminatory grounds.
Mr. Dhillon has moved private member notice of motion number 71. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. As you know, this House recognized April as Sikh Heritage Month in Ontario in 2013. This has allowed us, the Sikh community, to share our history, culture, and accomplishments with all Ontarians, and helped us keep our heritage alive and well through sharing these stories with younger generations of Ontario-born Sikhs. Sikhs have been dedicated members of the Canadian society for many years. They have contributed to the greatness of this country as hardworking, socially and politically active members of communities across Canada, including Ontario, where the Sikh population is 200,000 strong. 1904 saw the first wave of Sikh immigrants in Canada, a whole 258 Sikhs according to the census. Among these immigrants was Bhai Arjan Singh, who brought the first Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, our holy book, to Canada. Many of you will recall the name Baltej Singh Dhillon. He was the first Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer allowed to wear a turban and unshorn beard. Former Member of Parliament, the Honourable Gurbakh Singh Mali, our very own MPP Harinder Mali's father, was the first turban Sikh to be elected to the Canadian Parliament. As our Premier, the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, often reminds us, other than the Aboriginal peoples of Canada, we all came from somewhere else. Looking around at my colleagues, I see people from different backgrounds, speakers of different languages, and members of different religions. For many families in Ontario, the journey, the struggle to start a better life in Canada, in Ontario, is still a fresh lived experience. Madam Speaker, my family came to Canada in the late 60s. They arrived in Alberta, actually at the border of Alberta and BC, working in farms and hearing stories of not having proper winter clothes and having actually being forced to do jobs that were more harder than some and being paid at half the wages. And so what we can learn from this is that we should pass on these experiences to our future generations. And in my house, I make it a priority that my kids know to respect and not take for granted the great country that they live in. And as a matter of fact, when we travel abroad, I remember one time we were in India, I showed them the schools and the hospitals so they know and they can appreciate what they have here and actually preserve and build upon what we have so they can continue to live in a great country and moreover leave a better country for future generations. In the past few days, we saw the raising of the Nishan Sahib, which is the Sikh flag outside our legislature for the first time. And just as past Monday, we held the first Sikh prayer, which is called Kirtan, and welcomed the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji inside the Ontario legislature. These are just a few examples of how Ontario and Canada has grown to celebrate and appreciate different cultures, traditions, and ways of life. As we celebrate the accomplishments new and old, it is equally important for us to acknowledge the challenges that those before us faced. It's important that we do not forget the mistakes that were made, and we must ensure that generations ahead do not repeat them. This is a sentiment that many in Ontario will not only understand, but relate to as well. Various communities that now call Ontario home first experienced prejudices and uncertainty upon their arrival in this new country. The multicultural fabric of Ontario and the diversity of Canada is something we are all proud of. We know that Canada and true Canadians strive to uphold the rights and freedoms of all, to be inclusive and accepting of all, regardless of our differences. But we're not ignorant to the prejudices that existed, the discrimination that was practiced, and the hatred that stemmed from a lack of acceptance and understanding. What makes this even worse are the prejudices were embedded in Canadian policy and law. This was a systemic racism, one that we continue fighting to eradicate in various aspects of our society. One such event with significance to the Sikh community is the SS Komagata Maru incident of 1914. May 23, 1914 was a sad day in Canadian history. A ship sailed from Hong Kong to Vancouver. On board were 376 passengers, 12 Hindus, 24 Muslims, and 340 Sikhs. After spending over 1 month at sea, the passengers on their way to a new, better life were denied entry into Canada. They were not even permitted to disembark. For 2 months, the Komagata Maru and its passengers sat stranded at Vancouver's docks. During this time, the passengers were denied the most basic necessities, such as food and water. I would call this a truly un-Canadian welcome. These poor souls waited on the ship, fighting against hunger and disease, with the hope that they would be granted access to a new life, a prosperous life, a Canadian life. It's hard to think that what they fought so hard for, yet never received, is what so many of us in Ontario are blessed with today. On July 23, 1914, their hopes were completely crushed. The Canadian government sent 2 naval ships to escort the Komagata Maru out of Canadian territory. With heavy hearts and empty stomachs, the passengers on board began another 2 months' journey at sea. Upon their arrival in Calcutta, India, 20 passengers were killed by gunfire, 9 were wounded, the rest were taken as prisoners. The Komagata Maru incident violated human rights. The Canadian immigration laws that kept the passengers of the Komagata Maru off Canadian soil are a disgrace to what Canada represents. On August 3, 2008, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologized to the South Asian community in British Columbia. He offered an apology on one hand, while he led a government that toyed with the restrictive and selective immigration policies that discriminated against certain groups of people. I'm saddened and disturbed to know that members of the former governing party, some of whom sit in this House with us, were privy to that type of discriminatory practice and would have allowed for such policies once they remind us of the prejudice faced by the early Sikh and South Asian immigrants. We're fortunate to have a new government in Ottawa, one that represents the accepting and inclusive nature of true Canadians. That's why Prime Minister Trudeau helped welcome 25,000 Syrian refugees in Canada, many of whom have settled in Ontario. We have a federal government, much like our Ontario government, that truly looks like the Canada it represents. Yet, even in such a public arena, we have seen and heard the deep-rooted prejudice and discrimination from members who think it's okay to make fun of a turban or someone who speaks more than one language. Then again, we've also been hurt. We've also seen and heard the sexist behavior of some members of this House. But let me stay focused on this issue. The laws that violated the rights of those Sikhs and South Asians, the laws that showcased deep-rooted hatred towards immigrants, were not created in Surrey, BC. They were created in the Canadian Parliament. The horrid acts related to the Komagata Maru incident took life in the House of Commons. That is why this Premier, this government, and this caucus applauds Prime Minister Trudeau's recent announcement that he will offer a formal apology in the House of Commons for the Komagata Maru incident. This official apology will acknowledge the wrongdoings during that dark time. It will acknowledge that those who suffered through this incident deserve the same respect and dignity that Canada offers to so many people from diverse backgrounds. This official apology will right those wrongs. I support the federal government's decision to offer a full apology for this incident. I also call upon future governments to never again enact discriminatory immigration laws based on one's religion, ethnicity, gender, or race. The Prime Minister's announcement demonstrates Canada's focus on fostering a strong partnership with the Sikh community, a partnership that we can only celebrate here in Ontario. So, as we continue to enjoy Sikh History Month And as we share stories and memories of the Sikh community's achievements and resilience, let's take a moment to appreciate and acknowledge the sacrifices and struggles that came before us, that allowed for us to have our time of celebration. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
We turn back to the member from Brampton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to begin by first thanking the members that spoke on this bill, on this motion. The member from Thornhill, from Essex, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, member from Niagara West Glenbrook, from Mississauga Arundel, member from Mississauga South Brampton, pardon me, and the member from Bramley Gore Malton, and the member from Brampton Springdale. I think, Madam Speaker, we can all agree that the Komagata Maru incident was a very dark time in Canadian history. And as the member from Essex stated, the apology, a full apology in the House of Commons is long overdue. And it's truly a time for righting a wrong. This apology by Prime Minister Trudeau will be heard loudly across the world as a message of our Canadian values of caring, as a caring, compassionate, and an inclusive society. As a Canadian who happens to be Sikh, a member of the government under the Premier Kathleen Wynne's leadership, I'm very proud to say that we support the Prime Minister in his upcoming apology in the House of Commons. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Dhillon has moved private member notice motion number 71. Is it the pleasure of the House that motion carry? Carry. Okay, here carry. Okay, I declare the motion carried.